social engineering. All right, when it comes to social engineering and the Certified Ethical Hackers exam, I do want you to be aware of something here, and that is that I don't think there's a lot of social engineering on the exam, and what there is of it is easy. So I don't think you're going to have a lot of big challenges with this. So this is going to be something that's fairly obvious to you, and I think you'll be able to identify things pretty well there, especially after you've seen the things we have here for you. But this is probably going to be overall more information than you actually need, even for exam purposes. But we'll start off with talking about some of the various methods that hackers can use as social engineers. And these are loosely grouped methods, and they're closely associated with some of the psychology that's used to be able to get information out of people. We'll also talk about countermeasures to help prevent social engineering when you're on the defensive side of things and you don't want to be the victim of social engineering. Okay, as we get started here with social engineering, I gotta tell you, it's going to be probably the least technical of all the things that we'll be studying, because it's really more of a person-to-person interaction, although it can also use email, and there's some technical aspects to that. And many times it could be a face-to-face encounter or a phone encounter, text encounters of some kinds, things like this. Now, there's a definition of social engineering, and it really appears a couple of different ways throughout Certified Ethical Hacker materials of various types. But one of the definitions is the act of getting needed information from a person rather than breaking into a system. Okay, so instead of hacking a computer, so to speak, or cracking passwords, it's getting it from a person. Another definition is that it's manipulating a person or group of people into providing information, services, or resources that they would not otherwise provide. I think you'll get the general idea, though. You're trying to get something out of somebody. I've put both of those definitions in the study guide for your own perusal, but just be aware of the fact that we're really working with people here. And this is also something that it could be a matter of conscience, because you're directly manipulating persons here. You're not just hacking into kind of non-personal computers. And so I'll talk to you a little bit more about that, and perhaps the morals of that a little bit later on here as well. Now, as you might guess, a lot of social engineering really it's kind of a con job. A lot of people who are really good at social engineering might not even like to hear it called that, but in particular, it really kind of is, because you're conniving people into giving out something that they wouldn't otherwise do, as the definition mentioned. Let's take a look at some of the methods that could be used for something like this, though. One of those might be infiltration. Now, how do you do infiltration? This is one of those things that could take place in a number of different ways. You could make your way into a circle of friends from that particular workplace, for example. You might be able to find some place where they meet after work for drinks, or some place where they all congregate after work, maybe a health club that they all go to work out. And you just kind of start making friends with one or two of them, and then pretty soon you're part of the group, and you might be able to start deriving information from those people in that way. Another way that this could take place would be things such as applying for a job. I mean, I think I mentioned this early in this series, but if I'm interested in penetration testing a specific company, I'll probably find someone else on my team who that company has not met yet, don't know that other person, but who is technically adept. I'll look through their job postings and see if I can get this person into an interview. And in the interview, they can ask specific questions about their technology. And that would be fair questions to ask, because I need to know, if I'm a database administrator, am I accustomed to working with an Oracle or some other kind of a database? If I'm a Cisco person, am I comfortable also working with Active Directory? So I need to know some more things about their Active Directory. So you can ask job interview questions that will reveal, in footprint, so to speak, more about that location. And the best thing you could do is to actually get hired. So if you can get hired and you're actually in the organization, you can put hands on servers and things like that, then you've really successfully infiltrated that, and that's very close to really also just being a spy. Another thing you might take a look at is just being the fake administrator. This can take place a number of different ways, and it very often works with something called reverse social engineering, which I'll show you here in a couple of whiteboards. But with this, you can call someone and say, hey, this is Chet from the IT department. We noticed that your system was rebooted last night, and we need to double check some logins that may have taken place overnight. What's your username and password so we can confirm that we've got the right person? It's something like that. Now, Fortunately, in many corporations, people are being trained so that they know that they never give out the username or password, especially the password. They might give out a username, but especially the password over a phone conversation, and especially, again, if it was somebody else who is contacting them and they are not the ones who initiated the call. So the fake administrator thing is not working out quite as well as it used to. However, there are other tricks that you can use to kind of try to get that to work. Again, as I mentioned earlier, things such as reverse social engineering. Again, I'll talk about that later on. There's also an issue of tailgating. This aligns closely with physical security, and it's using persons to protect or not protect, in this case, physical security. Now, what this is, obviously, is where somebody with authorized access, maybe they have some kind of a badge that they swipe in a card reader, they swipe the card, the door pops open or it unlocks, and they go on through, and then hopefully you can kind of just slipstream in behind them unnoticed. On the other hand, you could also get noticed. This would be the case if you've got a box full of supplies or something like this, and you can't seem to quite reach the card reader. At least you make it look as if you can't reach it, and then you might even ask that person, hey, would you mind? Now, this is something you've probably seen on television shows and so on, where people are able to tailgate their way in. And I'll tell you, in organizations that are properly trained to avoid things such as tailgating, I find this to be quite embarrassing sometimes. As part of my job duties, I find that I'm very often at a nuclear facility, and obviously security is pretty paramount at these nuclear facilities. Well, I was doing some things there, and there was a group of people that I was working with, probably, 10 or 12 people, working with on a daily basis over the period of a week, and we would go into a specific room to have meetings and to do certain things, and I would go to this room, and I would have a key card access. As a visitor, I had a visitor's key card, and I would swipe it, the door would unlock, and you can hear it, and then you push the door open. It also makes kind of a beeping noise when you swipe your card. Well, there was a really sweet lady that was in part of this group, and inevitably, somehow or another, when we'd come back from lunch, she seemed to be the next one behind me. And as I would go through the door, I was not allowed to allow her through, and I would virtually slam the door in her face, and then she'd have to swipe her own card and open the door again. Now, although it feels kind of rude to let the door slam into somebody's face, that is really what you have to do in a lot of these cases. And I actually asked for clarification from that organization a little later on, and I was told from them that you can actually hold the door open for someone, but they still have to swipe the card, and you have to hear the little beep that it makes that confirms that they are a legit card-carrying employee. If they are not legit, or the card is expired or something like that, it makes some other kind of a noise. I don't know what it is. Some kind of a buzzing, or, thanks for playing, or, sirens go off. I don't know. NATO troops come in. I don't know what happens, but something else would be obvious that person should not be going in the door after you. Rewards is also a good motivator to get people to give up information. This could take place through an email, for example, where it'll say, please respond to our survey about how our company can work better, or how you can be better served as a customer, or whatever. And it'll say the first 10 respondents will be entered into a drawing for a Caribbean cruise. Actually, that's a pretty good ratio, isn't it? I think I would actually answer some kind of an ad for that. The first 10 respondents, you mean I got a chance of 1 in 10 instead of 1 in 10,000 or something like that? So that would be easy to respond to. In addition, all of the social engineering methods that I'm showing you here, as well as on subsequent whiteboards, will work out much better if you can do some additional research in advance. So if you can name some things, some company lingo, and this might this might include things such as just names, okay, that they would know, names of supervisors, names of other employees, things like that, and they could say, your boss, Corinne Johnson, she recommended that you take this survey because she thinks you're a pretty good employee there and you've been doing a good job, and if you can find out how long that person's been working there as well, that might be good. And you can say, we understand you've been working for the company for the past 5 years. We'd like to know what we can do to make things better. So if you can start dropping names or get some other additional information, and this could take place through social engineering other people. Maybe you're able to social engineer the boss, okay, and find out some information from them, and they told you how long some of the employees had been working there. Well, you don't always do all of your social engineering directly targeted toward one person all the time. Very often you'll have to kind of hopscotch around to different people so that, number one, you don't ask too many questions and raise suspicions. And number two, so you can start to pick up all of this lingo. Another thing you might pick up would be department names or projects. Okay, projects. I cannot spell that. Let me try that again. Projects. I guess I should get on the spelling project. Oh, dear heavens. Anyway, so maybe there's a project out there called the Jabberwocky Project or something like this, which is kind of a unique name. And by dropping that name, you can again get a little bit of additional credibility. One of the organizations I work with, their departments are strangely named. It's not sales or human resources or security or whatever the department is. You ask the person what department they work for, and they'll say something like, "Well, it's the 45JP group." Oh, what? 45JP. I have no earthly idea what any of that is. But somehow in that organization, they all know what they're talking about. So if I can just drop some of those names, that helps to salt things a little bit better as well. Anyway, those things kind of all apply to all of these different social engineering methods. But one of the biggest things you can do is to find a disgruntled employee. Because if you conduct a survey or an interview or something like that with a disgruntled employee, again, going back to something like conducting a phone survey or something, disgruntled employees are more than happy to tell everything that's wrong with the company. They might say, well, I had some great ideas for security implementations. I said we shouldn't use hollow core doors on the server room. But no, they just leave those hollow core doors there. They're not willing to put in a mag lock, none of those things. Well, now you know something about the physical security. Now that's an easy example, and of course it's easy for me to show how something could be revealed when I'm making it up, when I'm talking to you about it. But in reality, disgruntled employees are a great way to be able to get some of this information. Let me show you a couple of different things, actually. I have a couple of websites I pulled up. I'm sorry for being out of order. I forgot to show you this one a little bit earlier. But I was talking about rewards earlier. This is an actual article. Don't get mad at me. I'm just the messenger. I did not make this up. But it says that women are more likely to give up passwords for chocolate. And you can see the website up here. And apparently a study was done with some 500 people or whatever, 576 office workers, and 45% of the women were willing to tell somebody their password for a chocolate bar. This is a study that's actually been done many times in different cities. This is done in Europe, but I know of this also having been done in America, and people will often just give up their passwords. And then getting back to disgruntled employees, over here you can see again the website that's up here. You can probably Google for that. I don't think you can see the whole link up there. It just doesn't show up. But this is saying that you shouldn't make the IT guy mad, basically. And for example, there's a person here who worked for I think it was an alarm company or something like that, and he was able to remotely shut down cars because he got fired and he decided he wasn't going to have any of that. There's somebody else here. Let me see if I can get down to this. Oh, I can't show you one of these because it's potentially, oops, almost showed it. The one just below this, Tupac Shakur, or whoever this guy is, I can't remember his name, Tupac. Just below that one, there's another one where a guy turned a presentation into porn. One of the main bigwigs there was giving a PowerPoint presentation. After he was fired, they did not properly shut down his username and password, apparently. He was able to still get into the servers and whatnot, and he was able to modify a PowerPoint presentation that this executive was going to present a little bit later on, and he put in a pornographic photograph into that presentation. Wouldn't that be embarrassing? Well, by the way, all these people got caught as well because, well, sometimes when people get mad, they just can't really keep track of what they're doing or stay smart. Kind of tired of looking at Tupac there, so we'll go back to this burning car. Now, one of the things you want to keep in mind, and this is something that's a miscellaneous comment that I think will serve you well. If you're doing something like scanning networks, for example, you might want to change the MAC address of your local computer. And although that doesn't sound much like social engineering, when you're scanning networks, you might be able to pick up information you could use in social engineering. However, a scan could still be traced back to you because if you have a MAC address that's uniquely tied to your computer, and they always are, then you could get in trouble there. In the CEH study guide, I've got a couple of links there on how to change the MAC address, not only for Windows computers, but also for Mac computers and Linux computers. For all of those, you can change your MAC. Disgruntled employees will also very often post kind of foolish messages in social media. Now, there's a lot of good things you can get out of social media. The employees might be disgruntled and they might not be, but they might make careless remarks about what they're doing at work. People are so foolish on Twitter and Facebook. That's one reason why I rarely post anything on there, because I see the stupid stuff other people put up there. And so some people, I remember seeing a story recently where a woman was very disparaging towards her boss. And the boss gave her a great job apparently years before and had allowed her to get her way promoted up through the company and had a successful career. And she was very ungrateful in the end, and she was really putting him down, and she got fired over it. Well, it might not be exactly like that. However, you can get little hints about a person's company if they post a lot on social media. For example, if it's an IT person, you might see on their Facebook post, oh, have to work all night tonight because we're installing a new backup system, or we're installing new routers, or new switches, or something like that, or a new intrusion detection system. Now, no person in their right mind would say that if they're a professional IT person, but that kind of thing still happens. So if they were to say something like that, I would know that, oh, hey, tonight they're not going to have an IDS, or they're doing something different that might open up a window of opportunity for me. I was actually able to do this once because I saw an email network announcement that there was going to be a network change overnight. So I was able to get into a system that was normally protected, and it normally had certain ports closed and everything like that, but they were open for a brief window of time. I got in, got some financial records, took screenshots, and then I was able to show these screenshots to people, proving that I was able to get in because I saw the financial information. Another thing you could do, and I'm not really sure how much this is done anymore, but you could do something called dumpster diving. Now, if you ever go to some of these hackers conferences like the Black Hat conference that I went to in Las Vegas this past summer, it was Black Hat 9. Was it Black Hat? No, it wasn't. That was before the one I went to. The one I went to was DEF CON 19. And they will have exhibitors there that sell products and things. And in the past, they've sold little suits that you can, like dumpster diving suits. They're kind of like hazmat-looking suits so that you don't get rubbish all over your clothes. Now, I don't know if anybody ever actually buys those and uses those, but I do know that dumpster diving is done. And why is that? Because people throw things away that they're supposed to be shredding. They throw away confidential information, employee lists, customer lists, all different kinds of things. Account codes. Now, account codes, boy, that's another thing I should put up here in the company lingo. Account codes. This is a big one too, because if you get certain account codes, especially in terms of accounting and financials, then you can potentially make POs or make purchases or things of this nature. That's pretty sensitive in certain places. So you might be able to find account codes in your dumpster diving. I just had to think of this. I saw some hazmat suits or dumpster diving suits at the last DEF CON I went to. But another thing that was pretty funny about this DEF CON was it was at the Rio in Las Vegas. And some of the burgeoning hackers out there figured out a way to take over the elevator system. And what they would do is they would just lock up all the elevators, and you might be on the bottom floor in the casino level waiting for the elevators for 10 or 15 minutes, and they wouldn't release them just as a prank. One guy said that he got stuck. This wasn't one of the attendees. This was just another guest at the hotel. He was complaining to me because he says, I got stuck in the elevator for 15 minutes yesterday, and I knew what was going on. I tried not to let on that I knew what had happened. But some hackers had gotten in there and hacked into that thing. My wife and I actually went to this DEF CON recently together, and we were waiting at the elevator a long time, and then finally the elevator doors open, and a bunch of geeks from the conference came out. They were all giggling like, junior high school girls and everything, all giggling because they knew, and we knew that they knew, that they had locked up that elevator for several minutes. Let's take a look at also reverse social engineering. That's kind of an interesting one. Most of the time with social engineering, you are contacting somebody else, an employee, a security guard, whoever else it is that you're trying to talk to. With reverse social engineering, they call you. For example, if you can spoof an email, let's say, to an employee, and the email says that if you have problem with your internet or email or some other technical problem, be sure to call a specific number. I'll just say 602-555-1111, okay? And you can send this email out, and it may look as if it's a legit email from their IT department. This is where, again, it's going to come in handy if you can do some other social engineering to put in the right lingo in it, maybe the company logo, maybe the name of a department, maybe the name of somebody that's actually working in that IT department. Anyway, in this email you say, we're working on a switchover overnight. Tomorrow, if you have difficulty with your internet or your email, please call the following number. So they receive this in their email, and then the next morning they come in, and little do they know that you've performed a specific and targeted denial of service attack against their workstation. Now, as a result of that, they can still open Outlook, but they can't seem to receive any new email. They say, oh, I remember. Yesterday I got this email saying if I had trouble with internet or email or something like that, to call this number. Well, guess what? That actually happens to be your number. Now, I've heard about this being done. Actually, I just read about this. I've got a great book on social engineering that was very interesting. And what they did was when that number was called, they actually had a tape playing in the background of normal office noises, like people typing, other people talking, things like that. So it sounded very much like they were calling some kind of a hotline, and they call the number. Well, when they call you as the hacker, then you answer and say, okay, we need to just confirm that you're one of our employees. Please provide for me your employee ID. That may or may not be sensitive, but very often it is. So they provide their employee ID. Now, they're going to be much more trusting, and this is the whole thing. You have to be able to get their trust in most of these cases. And if you can get their trust, you're going to be a step ahead. Now, if they call you and they call the number that was advertised as the tech, help desk or whatever it is, then they already have kind of a tacit trust, and they're going to give you more information. Their login name, they may give up their password, things like this. So this is going to be very effective if you can get reverse social engineering. Another thing you might try is just get a company tour. A lot of these companies, especially if they're a manufacturing company of any kind, you can get a company tour, and that'll give you at least a lay of the land. You might not see much that's very security sensitive out of that, but at least you know which doors you're not supposed to go to, or those doors that say employees only, or things like this. So that can give you some information. Also, check out the role of an outside worker. I've actually used this myself a few different times, and it's worked out very, very well for me. The outside worker can take place in a couple of different ways. Number one, check to see where there's any kind of remodeling or building going on at the corporation. If it's a larger corporation, there's always something being built. So get yourself a hard hat, get yourself a clipboard, one of those orange vests for construction workers, whatever else like that. And then just walk up to the place and just walk in because you belong there. After all, you're trying to rebuild this wall that they need to construct. And if you can look as if you're part of that crew that's doing part of the building project, you're going to be a step ahead. It also kind of depends on who you are. Some people just don't have the construction guy look. I really don't. I don't work out very well with the construction guy look. I usually look better with a briefcase or a clipboard or something like that. And the other thing that I do, and this has actually worked out very well for me, is I just go in as a photographer. I've got a lot of very high-end, professional-level digital equipment, very expensive, I shoot professional sports and things like this. So I got a lot of really nice camera gear, and I'll just throw that big, long camera lens over my shoulder with the camera attached on a monopod, and I'll just walk into certain places. I've been able to get into concerts I shouldn't have been able to get into. Why? Because I had all that gear. I've been able to get into air shows and security-sensitive locations where there were Air Force jets. Okay, I've been close to Air Force jets, for example, and I was able to get into a lot of these places only because it looked like I belonged there. Now, that's not the complete story. I guess I have to tell you the rest now. Okay, I don't want to get somebody in trouble, and that's another part of this. I hate getting anybody in trouble if I can avoid it. When it came to things like those jets, I was actually able to just talk my way in. I didn't actually have to tell any lies at all. I just talked to some of the security guys there, to some of the guys with the M16s, or actually they are AR-15s now, I think. But anyway, with the machine guns and things like that. And I talked to the crew of the Air Force jet at this air show here in Phoenix area a couple of years back. And I just said, I'm a professional photographer, and I'd like to see if I can get a little closer. And I chatted up the crew and the mechanics and everything like that. And then when it came time for them to start the air show, I noticed that there was a gap in the fence. And I could actually sneak through that gap in the fence. Well, I just kind of walked up to that gap in the fence, and one of the crew was not too far away, and I kind of waved at him and said, hey, how's it going? And the guy said, hey, why don't you come on through here? You can shoot better from the other side of this fence. Guess what? The press and everybody else, newspaper photographers, everybody, other photographers who had been hired by the event, had to stand behind an 8-foot chain link fence to shoot. I was able to go right through, and he told the security guy, the guy with the machine gun, he said, go ahead and let him through. He's with us. And I got the whole thing done, really just by asking. So you don't always have to lie. Sometimes you can get in just by being nice, not necessarily being manipulative, just being nice to people. Okay, so anyway, it's a little bit of a tangent there, but a lot of this stuff can work as well. Email is another good way for social engineering, and this is something you might need to know for exam purposes. This is the most effective way of doing social engineering right now, particularly phishing and or spear phishing. And I'll get back to this fake URL here in a moment, but what is this? I think you're aware of the fact that phishing is an email that tries to solicit some kind of information from you. So if you were naive and you responded to a phishing email, then it might say something like, please take our survey, and it would ask for your name, it might ask for your social security number. Most people know not to do that, but guess what? If you send out enough phishing emails, somebody will answer it, especially if you combine it with something that we were looking at earlier over here. Again, these rewards that I was talking about earlier. That's a big thing when it comes to getting people to fill out surveys and things like that, or responding to a phishing request. Oh, I got to show you this. I had to block out a lot of this, but I think that this could have been a phishing item or potentially an effort to plant malware on my computer. You may have gotten these too as well. But I got a message from Twitter, and it was a legit email. It was actually from Twitter, but somebody decided to start following me. I blocked out a lot of stuff here. So this person at such and such an address is following me. This was my email address, was right under here. And it said, this person right here, so please be disease-free. Oh boy. I knew right away that this might be kind of interesting. I don't know if you can see the picture, but it's kind of an attractive woman over here. I can't even read the rest of this out loud. I blocked out a lot of it, but it's still, just use your imagination. It's very, very bad, people. Anyway, please follow me. And then it gives me this link down here. Wow. Well, a couple of flashing red lights that go off in my head, when I hear klaxons and sirens going off when I see this email. First of all, look at this person's following 596 people. So I know right away that they probably sent this out probably figured out an automated way to follow a whole gaggle of Twitter people. What do you call these people? Twitter folks, something like that. They figured out a way to do all of this, and yet they're not tweeting anything, and and they don't have any followers. So they came online like today and figured out how to follow all these people, and then they give me a link down here that's not even part of Twitter. And so I was smart enough not to click on that, because who knows what that is. That could take me to a site where I was supposed to sign up for a specific membership of questionable morality, or it could have been something that was a malicious web page or something like this. So definitely you got to be careful of that sort of thing. Now, this might not have even been a social engineering attempt, but in a certain kind of way it is, because it's a specific person trying to reach out to me individually, as well as these other 596 boyfriends. Anyway, if I were trying to be a little bit more targeted, I might find somebody at a certain company that has a Twitter account, and just about everybody does, it seems, these days, and I would just start following them. You'll be amazed that if you just start randomly looking for people on Twitter or Facebook and follow them or friend them, most of the time, even if you're a total stranger, they will still respond to your request and let you be their friend and so on. It's just amazing how often this happens. I have a friend of mine that's a hacker and does a lot of social engineering. He has set up a whole Facebook identity. It's got his picture there, but the rest of it's all fictional. It says how many children he has, how many kids he has, how many wives he has. How many wives? It says he has a wife. All these other kinds of things. The whole thing is fictional, and he only uses it so that he can follow or friend other people on Facebook. And then if they ever try to trace it back to him, none of the other information about himself is actually legit, so it's very difficult to track him down. Anyway, that's the kind of things you get in email sometimes, the friend requests and whatnot. And the phishing is, again, an attempt to contact you. Then there's also spear phishing. They're very similar. Both of them are an attempt to elicit information from us, or to get us to click on something or to respond in a certain way, like that Twitter email that I got. But I got a phishing attempt. Spear phishing is something that's directed specifically at you and only you, and they're trying to draw information out of you individually. It's not a broadcast message or something like that. And again, very often they will have a fake URL like the one I showed you in there. And that was not a Twitter link to click on, and it didn't have to be. The person who wrote that out, they just put in some link in the message that they sent me, and if I were to click on it, I'm not really quite sure what would have happened, but it probably would have been bad. Now, I've mentioned surveys a couple of times. These, again, are a great way to get information from people. If you can spoof this, spoof the email to make it look as if it did come from human resources, for example, please tell us how to improve our company. And what you'll want to do is to put in a lot of legit questions that a real human resources department would want, but you'll also put in there, ask them what their employee ID is, maybe what their login is, something like this, anything that's more security sensitive. Now, you got to be careful about these surveys. First of all, you'll send those out in email, and you can do a phishing attempt there, where you broadcast it and send it out to like everybody in the company or an entire department or something. Or you can do spear phishing if you're looking for a specific person and you only want to get information from that one user. Now, if you do this, normally there's going to be a link in it, and when you click on it, it might take you to something like this website. This is actually one that I created on my own, and I just created this as kind of an example. I just created this in front page, and it just says, how satisfied are you with your current IPS? Okay, satisfied, unsatisfied. It looks like a legit survey. What other IDS do you currently use, whether it's Snort or some other product or something like that? Enter your comments, and you see there's a lot of different things here. And then here's where we want to start getting more specific information. Tell us where to mail your free copy of How to Make $1 Million and Never Pay Taxes. You see, that's the reward thing I was talking about in social engineering earlier. And then you can put in some address information there, or maybe their employee ID, whatever. Then you can submit the comments. And then at the bottom, I put in something else to make it kind of look legit. Just some more stuff to make it look as if it came from a real company. Now, when you do these things, again, a lot of these social engineering attacks are multi-layered, multi-steps. I might really only care about a cost center in this. And so I might just add into this form, your manager's name, and then now that I've got the manager's name, I might send the manager, or I might call the manager pretending to be somebody else, saying, hey, we're over here, we can't get a cost center for this specific project. What's the cost center number? And they might just say, oh, well, that's 5978. Okay, thank you very much. Now we can open up a ticket for this particular job or whatever. So you just kind of converse your way through that after you've gathered a little bit of information there. Also, be careful if you're doing something like these surveys. If you do send out a physical survey that they have to hand write out, be very careful about using the United States Postal Service. Why? Because even if you have a CH contract to penetration test this specific company, and you've got their permission to do this over, say, a couple of weeks, well, the United States Postal Service and the United States government did not give you permission to use the mail system for mail fraud. So you could still have some legal liability there if you send out some kind of fraudulent materials in the mail. Same, of course, would be true for FedEx or UPS or whatever else. Now, also, before we move on, I want to just point out a website to you. This has also got a link on our study guide, but it's the socialengineer.org website. Notice the hyphen in social engineer. This has got all kinds of great resources in here. You can spend a lot of time here and get a lot of good information about social engineering, but one of the key parts of it is the social engineer framework, which is kind of an outline of all the major categories that you'll need to know about for social engineering. I don't think you need to memorize any of this for the Certified Ethical Hacker exam, but if you want to further explore social engineering, this is definitely a place that you want to become very, very familiar with. And it gives you all different kinds of things here. The categories of social engineers, different kinds of common attacks, some of the psychology behind social engineering. I think that's further on down. Yeah, psychological principles, how to influence other people. Lots of different things are involved in this, including some things that are actually kind of technical, like the physical aspects here, such as the ability to lock picks and shims, lockpick and use shims. Last time I went to DEF CON, I actually took a session on how to pick locks and get out of handcuffs and do all these sorts of things. So it's pretty interesting information that some of this can be. As a good example, I haven't clicked on this one yet, but caller ID spoofing is definitely one that you're going to probably want to do, because The caller ID, when you call some of these employees, it's going to show that it's not coming maybe from an internal number. A number of different ways that you can work with that. For example, you can call into a switchboard and get transferred, or deliberately call the wrong person and say, oh, hey, I was looking for Josephine over in accounting. I must have gotten you somehow. Can you just transfer me over there? A lot of times when you get transferred, it will show the caller ID as having come from within the building then. So a lot of that could be very, very useful there, and it gives you some methods for doing that sort of thing. But the socialengineer.org website, very, very useful. Now, let's take a look at some psychological factors related to social engineering. One of those psychological factors that you might be able to play on is the fear of, or the emotion of fear and intimidation. You might be able to call someone up and say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm your boss's boss. And again, if you can call some names out and you name somebody that's a bigwig, then you might be able to provide a little bit of intimidation. And you might say, we're supposed to have gotten this from your boss earlier today, but we didn't get this from him, we can't get a hold of him. Would you please give us the cost center number for this project? And, you get a couple of different factors in there. Number one, the fear part of this is you don't want to get in trouble for not providing that information. The intimidation is that person is like 2 levels above you, and you don't want to get in trouble for, again, not providing that information. The other part of the social engineer is you might also come off as the hero. You were able to help your boss and to prevent your boss from getting in trouble, and maybe they owe you a favor now. There's a lot of different things involved in that. However, you got to be very careful of fear and intimidation, because although it's very effective in getting the information you want, it also really sticks out in that person's day. And if they've been scared into giving you information, they might think about that a few minutes later and say, oh man, you know what? That person was really mean to me. I'm going to probably ask my boss about that person and see if they're really that mean. And if they start asking the boss too many questions, they'll say, wait a minute. You shouldn't have given that information out. Who asked you this again? And so then you start to get found out. You got to watch out for that one. Revenge and disgruntled employees are also a big part of this. For example, you might be able to find somebody in the company who really doesn't get along with another person. And that happens all the time in office politics and personality clashes and things like this. And so if you're able to leverage somebody's desire for revenge against someone else, you might be able to take advantage of that. Also, there's the disgruntled employee thing. One thing that's important about this, and this is good practice for security practices, is that if you ever have to lay somebody off, what are you supposed to do? Well, one of the things you should do is do it later in the day so that it does not disrupt the business environment if they get mad or yell or throw a tantrum or start crying. That happens as well. You also want to make the interview, or rather the exit interview, very, very brief and say, I'm sorry, we no longer have need for your services. So-and-so will escort you out of the building. It might be a supervisor or a security guard. We will send you your personal effects from your desk or your workstation. Also, before you've interviewed that employee to provide their exit interview, before they even get to your office, you should have already terminated their user accounts and any other accounts that they may have created that could be potentially back doors to get into the company. Now, the reason why I say this is because I just read about something that happened here where an organization did it mostly right. They made the interview at the end of the day. They told the person their services were no longer needed. It seemed to be going well, and the person understood, and they knew that times were tough, and the company hadn't been doing as well, and so on. And they even shared a joke or two before they left, and it was a long-time employee, and it seemed to be as amicable a departure as could possibly be. But on the way out, the person said, oh, you know what? I left some pictures of my kids over on my desk, and can I get my pictures off the computer, my personal pictures and things like that? And since they'd had such a good time together and they'd worked together for so many years, they said, sure, just go on ahead and go over there and take care of that. And the person was only over at their desk for about 15 minutes. But they were able to install a keylogger centrally somewhere in the computer systems, and they were able to get usernames and passwords that they were able to use later on. They were also able to, in just a few short minutes, delete much of that company's databases and critical customer information. And they hadn't been keeping backups the way they should, so some of their backups were up to 2 months old. And this was a catastrophic problem in that company. I just read about that one. Also, there's a matter of reciprocation. If you do something nice for me, I'll do something nice for you. Now, this looks a lot of different ways as well. You might create a problem where somebody needs some help from you. So, for example, if you have some limited level of physical access, you might even let the air out of somebody's tires. And then you go by after work and you see that their tire is flat and you say, hey, I'll help you with that. A lot of things you can do there as well is when you help them change their flat tire in the company parking lot, it would be a good idea if you would even craft your own fake badge. It doesn't have to be real, but it says the name of the company on here. It has your delightful little picture on it right here, and it might look exactly like a company badge. So that the next day, tomorrow, when you walk into the building with that person whose tire you changed the previous evening, then they say, oh, hey, thanks for changing my tire yesterday. Ah, no problem. And they swipe their card and they walk in and you easily tailgate in after them, cracking a few jokes or telling them about the time that you had a flat tire out on the highway and almost got run over. And now you're inside the building. So you see, that's somewhat a reciprocation, but it could take a step further than that as well. In that since you did something nice for them, that is changing their tire, then as you're going into the building, you might say, oh, hey, you know what department do you work in? Oh, you work there? You know what? I just had a problem with something that was going on over there, and I couldn't get the proper account number from something. Can you help me figure out the right account number for this cost center? Well, of course, they're more likely to help you because you changed their tire for them yesterday. Also, there's the issue of being a hero or a good Samaritan. It's kind of similar to this one as well, the reciprocation. But if you call up and say, oh, you know what? I work for so-and-so, and I'm in a lot of trouble. I haven't been doing a lot of the job requirements for my job because I'm new here, and I really need this job, but my boss is mad because I can't seem to get a certain bit of information. It seems like it's taking me too long to learn the computer systems, and I can't remember how to find a certain client or a certain bit of sensitive information in the computer system. And that person might feel bad for you and say, oh yeah, I know, this is a tough place to work at. The computer systems are hard to learn. I had the same problem when I first got started here. Here, let me tell you, let me help you out here. And so that they can then help you as the hero. And everybody wants to be a good Samaritan. People want to do favors. It feels good to help somebody else. And so naturally, it's a good idea to do that kind of thing under any other kind of circumstance. Now, this is the kind of thing where people that are well trained will need to start asking questions when they see any of these things that I've talked about up to this point, in fact. Now, a lot of organizations that have good training against social engineering will be able to stop you at many points along all of these factors. But before I get back to that, let me talk about the last one on here first, and that is flattery. You might say, oh, hey, that's a great looking jacket. Where did you get that? And if you can flatter somebody and get them kind of on your side, they're, again, a lot more likely to give you information that you need a little bit later on. Also, I should put a couple of other things on here that I forgot to put on here earlier. But number one, watch TV. That's not really a psychological factor. But there are a couple of TV shows out there that actually do a good job, kind of an entertaining way of showing you social engineering. Probably the best one out there is White Collar. I don't know if it's still on the network now, but White Collar on USA. I think there's also another one called The Leverage. And a lot of these shows, another one is called Burn Notice, also on USA. Sounds like a commercial for TV shows, doesn't it? But really, they actually, especially on Burn Notice, they actually explain how to social engineer people a lot of times. And almost on every show. And it's very, very useful information. I don't know that you could use everything you see there, but a lot of the principles actually do work. Now, the other thing I want to put out on here, and again, this is not really psychological, but something you need to think about, is the moral flexibility that you may or may not have to have here. I honestly have a very difficult time using social engineering anymore. If I can't get what I want just by asking or hopefully charming my way into something or being nice, a lot of these other methods that we've talked about here, they're kind of hard for me to do just because there is an ethical factor there that I have a difficult time with. I didn't used to have as much of a problem with them, but as I've raised my own children and I've got wonderful kids who are just moral, ethical kids and have a good conscience and everything like that. And I raise them by example as well. I don't want to start doing things I tell them not to do. So that's part of it as well. Another part of this is that you sometimes have to be kind of stone cold with all of these things that you do for social engineering, as well as a lot of hacking. For example, you may have met as part of your penetration test interview when you first met the company and you started signing contracts and outlining the scope of the job. You probably met with a lot of people in the IT department. And as you met them, you may have gone to lunch with them. Maybe you made friends with some of them. Maybe you went golfing with some of them. Guess what? The stuff that you figure out and the problems you find out with their security could get them demoted. It could get them fired. And so these people that you've been so nice to, or that you might have social engineered to, you might put their job in jeopardy, or they're standing in the company in jeopardy, and they might get fired. And they may even be in legal trouble for some of the things that you've been able to convince them to do. For example, if you give somebody in a government organization, if you convince somebody to give up classified information, that's certainly a terminating offense, as well as potentially legally complicating for that person. So you really got to decide if you have the stomach to do a lot of these things. In fact, maybe we ought to take an oath to be as nice as we can whenever we can. I know that sometimes there's unfortunate consequences of hacking, but whenever we can, let's try to be nice to people, right? So do this with me, would you? Wherever you are, whether you're in your office cubicle or at home or in your mother's basement, raise your right hand, okay? Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I will not hurt other people whenever possible. Okay, did you say that? Say it again. I will not hurt other people whenever possible. Okay, especially because these things we're looking at here, they could just be emotionally damaging as much as anything. People can get really hurt with some of this stuff, and I'd hate to see somebody get hurt unnecessarily as much as possible. And I know some of you people out there, you jokers raised your left hand instead of your right hand to try to get out of the oath, right? Okay, so if you did that, keep your left hand in the air. Now, take your right hand and smack yourself in the face with it. Shame on you. Everybody try to be nice whenever you can. All right, now let's take a look at some countermeasures for social engineering. First of all, you need to have a very clear policy. This is going to be in writing. A lot of times employees will have to sign something saying that they've either taken the security training or the employee training, or they've read the handbook, things like this. And it needs to be very clear about what to do in certain instances. This could have to do with a lot of different things not related to social engineering, such as whether or not they're allowed to use their computer for personal use, whether or not it can be used during lunch break, things like this. But included in that will also be what to do in certain situations. For example, if somebody calls the employee and says that they're a reporter with a local news station, what should that employee do? Now, this could be a legitimate reporter from a real news station asking questions about the company. And if that's the case, regardless, they should be referred to media relations or some other similarly named department within the organization, or a supervisor or something like this. Generally speaking, most organizations do not want their employees answering questions from reporters. As far as social engineering is concerned, it's very easy to pretend to be a reporter and to ask all kinds of nosy questions. A lot of people actually kind of like to have attention put on them. You know, oh, I was able to help this reporter get this big story. And so it's kind of a little bit of a flattering thing that can take place in there, but you need to have a policy that they're not allowed to talk to reporters or whatever. Also, the other part of the policy might be if someone from the help desk calls them, then that policy should state that the employee will know that they never have to give out their username and password. Very few times, if ever, does a legitimate IT department ask for that specific information. You also need to enforce the policy. If somebody violates the policy, and for example, they do talk to someone pretending to be a reporter, and they do give away sensitive information, what's the consequence? Are they docked any pay? Are they suspended? Are they demoted? Are they fired? Those sorts of things. And if the employees know that the policies are seldom, if ever, enforced, then the policy doesn't mean much. Okay, so you do have to enforce it. Also, implement good physical security. This especially takes place as it relates to things like tailgating, because that's part of physical security, where you never let anybody in the door behind you. This actually has been trained a lot of different times in a lot of different places, especially at airports, and yet you still see hidden cameras from various news stations and so on that will very often show that employees still let other employees tailgate behind them, and it just seems like the nice thing to do, to hold the door open for somebody without them ever actually having to provide any credentials. Here in Phoenix, a couple years back, in fact, they had an expose on that, where reporters pretending to be employees at the airport actually walked into areas they weren't supposed to be able to go to. Also, you do have to have good user training. This is probably going to implement the policy that they have in writing. It's probably going to be somebody that instructs them on all the company procedures and things like that. And so there has to be good user training into identifying how they could be potentially social engineered. To know that, anytime they receive an email from the IT department, it will never ask them again for their credentials, or perhaps even that email from certain parts of the organization are always signed with a digital certificate. So if they know that and they get an email from a location of the company that's normally got a digital certificate signature and it's not signed, then they know that they can't trust that email. They might be able to forward that to their supervisor or to the legitimate IT department. Also, perform applicant background checks. This is going to help avoid spies from competing companies from getting jobs inside of your company and finding out your secrets. If you do a background check, that will very clearly identify who they currently work for, and you'll be able to figure out that they work for your competitor, or maybe they've worked for your competitor in the past. You got to be careful of that, because that could be attractive. If they no longer work for that competitor, then it might be attractive to hire them so you can find out their secrets. But it could still be a plant, though. Also, sometimes for email, you might want to track email forwards. A lot of organizations have emails that should never be forwarded outside of the company or never forwarded anywhere, and you might want to identify anytime that happens. There's some programmatically some methods that can help you do that, but there's also this website here, readnotify.com, and with this one, it'll be able to track whether or not something has been forwarded. It also identifies when somebody opened the email. It can even tell you the approximate geographic location of the recipient of that email. So, this is just one example. There's a lot of different things to do this. This is one example of a website that could do those things. It could tell you if someone clicked on a URL in it, the recipient's IP address. You can see a lot of different things that are here. In this nugget, we talked about social engineering. And we started off by talking about various methods that can be used, such as impersonating an IT person, the most effective one, which would be phishing of some type, tailgating, using social media, that sort of thing, as well as the psychology behind it, whether it's fear or flattery or the desire for people to be a hero. All these kinds of things take part in social engineering because you're dealing with the weakest link in any security scheme, and that's always the people themselves. Also, we took a look here at some countermeasures to help avoid being the victim of social engineering, such as having the proper training, having proper physical access or physical security, and such. Well, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.